and welcome to the Face of Pro-Life. Today we're going to be speaking about one of my favorite topics, adoption. And we're speaking with Michael Smith, who has 4 children, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his adoption experience. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure, thanks for having me, Corinne.
So tell me a little bit about your children.
Well, my wife Maria and I have 4 children. Our son David is 17, our daughter Rosa is 14, and then our 2 adopted children, Joseph is 9, and he's from Korea, and Liang is 6, and she's from China.
So a lot of people adopt children, and a lot of them seem to go outside of the country. What caused you and Maria to choose to adopt internationally?
Well, it wasn't something, I don't think we ever discussed it before we got married, or even for a long time while we were married. But I remember that sometime around 1999 or 2000, the kids were maybe 7 and 4 years old. One Sunday I was reading the paper at the kitchen table and read a long feature story about a family that had adopted a little girl from China. And it was a long feature article with pictures, and I remember after I got done reading that, I just thought, you know, we could do that. And I wasn't at the point where I was saying we should do that or we're going to do that, but the seed had been planted, and I talked to my wife about it at that time, and that's when we started to think about it.
So it wasn't really something that you had explored adoption domestically or anything like that. It's just something that you had seen.
We never did. This just was the way that we happened to approach it. And then I also had a friend that I had worked with, and he and his wife had adopted a little boy from Korea. So after we got a little deeper into thinking about it, I spoke with him, learned about the process they had been through, so it was kind of natural for us to follow that path.
So tell us a little bit about the process. Now, were the processes between Korea and China similar, or were they very different?
They were similar. China was a little more involved, but the way it works is first you have to put together a dossier of documents. There's about a dozen documents, and it's pretty involved. You know, it's a birth certificate, marriage license. They have to come out and check out your home. You need references from a couple of friends, you know, police and background check, all kinds of things. And you need to gather these up, and then they all need to be notarized, and then the notarizations need to be validated. And for us, it was a little more complicated because my wife is from Italy, so we had to deal with Italy for that. And then you get all those documents together, and you put them in an envelope, and you say a prayer that they don't get lost because of all the work you did, and then it goes out.
So it's quite intimidating when you first look at it. I mean, it's a very involved process as far as documentation.
And it took us a few months to get through it.
So it's easier to run for president than it is to adopt internationally.
Well, I haven't run for president yet, but...
But you have your documentation, right?
Yes.
So how long did it take? You send it off to you said the appropriate organizations, and how long does it take?
For Korea, from the time we sent the documents, it was just a few months until we got a placement. For China, it was somewhat longer than that, but I have to say now it's going back 9 years and 6 years since we adopted. My understanding is the process has become more difficult. More difficult. And takes quite a bit longer, yeah.
Why is it? Why do you think it's become more difficult?
Well, I know in the case of Korea that they strongly would like to keep the kids at home now. So I think they're just making it more difficult because they'd like to keep the kids in Korea. So they're actually paying parents to do this. In China, I'm not sure. I really don't know what the reasons are. But I know they've become a lot stricter in terms of the rules, in terms of your age, in terms of parents' health, weight, you know, medical history, all kinds of things that they restrict people now that they did not in the past.
That was kind of true in the United States. You know, like to adopt domestically, I don't know how it is now, but I know in the past, you know, there were very strict age limitations, like you said, and financial and all sorts of different things, restrictions that are put on people. So do you think they're just following that step, or do you think more they're just trying to, like you said, keep their children?
I know in the case of Korea, they've said plainly that they want to keep the kids at home, which I guess is a good thing. I mean, in China, for some reason, the people there generally don't adopt. I mean, I think I sensed a lot of admiration in them for the people that did, but it's just not part of their culture.
Well, because they only have one kid.
Well, I think adoption, they probably wouldn't count that as a child. It's just for them, they told me that the blood is very important, and it's just not something that they generally do, is to raise someone else's child.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I noticed, so you say you got a little boy from Korea, and you said somebody else had gotten a little boy. You know, you never see little boys from China.
Right, that's right. So the reasons why children are available for adoption are very different in the two places. So in Korea, abortion is very much restricted. So it doesn't happen a lot. It's not prosecuted when it does, so it does happen, but generally it's not legal. But they do have a lot of teen pregnancy, and it's not really considered acceptable for a young woman to raise a child by herself. So that's why you kind of get the 50-50. I mean, they told us that if we adopted from Korea, it was about even chances for a boy or a girl.
Wow. So, I mean, that's ideally what you want in a culture, you know, I mean, because, you know, the girl isn't really capable of raising the child. I mean, she shouldn't be shunned because she got pregnant, but it's a great opportunity for her to give life, and a greater opportunity for you to be able to raise the child. What would you say to other people who were out there? Did you want more children, and you just turned to adoption, or you just decided you wanted to adopt?
We wanted more children. Now, my wife was 39 when we had Rosa, our last daughter, and you know, for whatever reason, it just didn't happen for us again after that. I think when we first started talking about it, my wife wanted to wait a little bit and see if maybe it would, but at some point it becomes probable that it's just not going to. And so that's when we decided to go ahead and expand the family that way.
Were your friends and family, were they shocked that you were going to?
I know my parents took to the idea right away. I think Maria's parents, it was a bit more, it was unusual for them. It wasn't something they expected, but I have to say that once the kids got home, they took to their new grandkids just like that.
They're so cute.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more. So you did send off your documentation, and then you get a phone call, or what happened?
Eventually you get a phone call. My wife got the call at home, and then she called me at work. And then
How exciting is that?
It's very exciting. And then you get a name. And then a little later you'll get a mail with some more information, you know, the story of your child and how they came to be an orphan. And then there are pictures. In Joseph's case, about half a dozen pictures that we got before we got him. And Lily's case, just two pictures.
And so what is his story? Was his mother a teenage?
Well, the specific stories of the kids, the best ideas, the best advice we got was not to speak, right? Because you know, in time we'll tell them, but it's important to make sure that they hear that from their parents when the time is right.
So
but I can tell you their stories are very typical. Both their stories are very typical.
And so I know I was adopted, and I've always known I was adopted, and I always thought, you know, that was the healthy thing to do, because I never thought there was anything. In fact, when I was really little, I just thought all kids were adopted, and then when I found out that I was different, I felt I was special. You know, it wasn't a stigma or anything. Because my parents were always honest with me, you know, so I felt that was the best way to be, because then I didn't think that there was anything strange or, you know, different about it. Have you been open with your kids?
Well, I mean, obviously my kids are Asian, so it's pretty apparent that they're not my biological children. And you know, Joseph is the one who's really interested in learning about Korea. It's very important to him that he's Korean, you know, wants to have Korean things. It's a big treat for him to go to the Korean restaurant on his birthday.
Korean food is very good.
Whereas Liang, she's never asked any questions. She very freely tells people she's from China, but she never asks any questions about it.
So it's very different in the two experiences.
They're just very different personalities.
How old were the kids when you were able to bring them home?
Joseph was 6 months, and Lily was 13 months.
Oh, so she was fairly old. So.
She was, and that's why we let her keep her Chinese name. Her name is Liang, and we call her Liang Maria.
That's really pretty. And Joseph, you changed his name?
Joseph, we changed his name. His name was originally Jun Hyung. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice too, though. But Joseph is fairly close. So how were your older kids with the whole situation?
They loved, especially my daughter Rosa, waited for, and she's sitting back there. She waited for a younger sibling for the longest time, and she just loved having both of them in the house.
because they are really adorable. And I know we have some pictures
Yes.
that you brought, so I'd like to show everybody
Okay, sure.
your beautiful family.
Yeah, I brought a couple of examples of the pictures that you get before you actually get your child. So,
It should take a couple minutes for our
Okay,
camera crew to,
sure.
to adjust. So that's a very exciting time.
yeah, and actually for Liang, we got the packet, the first packet we got was actually written in Chinese. So the story that came, the first mail we got, they said, we haven't had time to translate it, so here it is in Chinese. So I took it to work to a chemist from China that I work with, and I said, can you read this to me? So that was kind of neat, having him translate the document as I was hearing the story of my daughter for the
How
first
did he
time.
feel about the whole situation?
He actually mentions to me that he and his wife think about adopting. So
Really?
he's an American now. He's an American citizen, going to stay here. So he's certainly not under any one-child policy. So
Oh, wow.
he talks about it.
Oh, that's really exciting.
Okay.
I think we're ready to show your pictures. So you have a picture of both Joseph and Lily from China.
Right. So this is one of the pictures that came from the foster family that Joseph was with, and we got this before we got him. So he's probably 4 or 5 months old there.
Too cute.
And Liang's picture on the right there, she was 13 months when we got her, so I'm going to say she's probably about 10 or 11 months old there.
Oh, too adorable.
And then just below that, we have a picture. This is in the city of Changsha in the Hunan province of China, and that's just after they handed me my daughter. That picture was taken by my son David. So this is a large room where people were bringing babies from all kinds of orphanages all over Hunan, and parents were milling about with their babies that they had just met. And we have a picture of my wife with Joseph very shortly after he came to us. A very big baby. And then
Very
that's,
big, 'cause you said
he
he
was
was
6 months. He was
my gosh.
22 or 23 pounds. They believe in fattening babies up in Korea. So, and that's the whole crew on the other picture there. My son David, my daughter Rosa. And that's Joseph and Liang fairly recently.
Oh, that's a beautiful picture.
And there's the two of them together.
Oh, too cute. So you you get the pictures, you get the packet, and then you went to Korea.
Joseph we picked up at JFK.
Oh,
so
did you?
that's the way Korea does it. They have someone that works with the staff bring him over.
That's probably easier for you.
It's easier. Well, I mean, China was an adventure. I took my son David with me, and we spent 10 or 12 days in China. So that's more memorable to do it that way.
Right. Now, have you taken the kids back at all?
No, but I plan to. I'd like to do it when they're at an age where they're going to remember. So I think maybe in another 3 years or so, we'd like to do both, just do the whole Asia tour.
Yeah, and I'm sure Joseph will really appreciate that because, like you said, he's a little more curious than your daughter.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, when I brought my daughter home, he was 4 years old, and he saw that we brought home a big packet of paperwork, and he saw that and put 2 and 2 together, and he wanted some answers. So,
Really? Really?
Sometimes I was wondering if he was 4 or 14 with some of the questions he was asking. Yeah.
So, how did he feel when you went and adopted brought your daughter
He took right
home?
to his little sister.
Did he?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, they've been great all along.
And okay, so I keep forgetting so the time-wise. So from the time you got it took a couple months, you said, for the letter to come.
A few months to get the match, and how that works, we have no idea. I mean, they tell us that's an opaque process in that country. They do, however they match a child with a family, nobody could tell us. But once that's done, then it moves pretty quickly after that.
And then how long after you got your packet did you meet him at JFK?
That was probably a couple of months.
Really? That is fast.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the long wait is to wait for the match.
Right.
And that's what takes the longest.
Yeah. And as far as the Chinese process with your daughter,
that was slower. I'd say about double the time wait. But the agency put together all the travel plans for us, and it was probably about 3 months after we got the match that we traveled to China.
And so obviously you've doubled your family, and it was a very rewarding experience. So you are encouraging your colleague to
Well, my colleague and everybody, I mean, I think anybody that's thought about this, even if the thought has crossed your mind that you might be a good adoptive parent, it can't hurt to talk to an agency and just have that initial consultation. It's free, and just find out what the process is, because obviously it's a good way to live out your Catholic faith. It's a very powerful pro-life thing to do, and it's been very rewarding for us, not only for me, but for my other kids as well.
Oh, sure, sure, and your friends and their families as well, and obviously you've these children have brought a lot of joy to your community, because they really are adorable. I remember when you brought your daughter home, to the friary, like one of the first times. She was so cute. So, as far as other in culture, like cultural experiences, you take your son to Korean restaurant and stuff. Are there any other ways that you teach them about their heritage?
We get them books. We read them books. I know as I was passing through the house the other day, I saw a book about Korea on the couch that I know that Joseph is reading. So for Korea, it's a little more difficult just because there's not as many Korean people. I mean, Leon meets a lot of Chinese people. When we go out to the restaurant, she loves to greet the waitresses in Chinese, and they make a big fuss over her.
Oh, that's so cute.
But for Korea, it is a little more difficult.
Now, I know I have some friends that also adopted from China, and they have actually clubs. Do you participate in any of the clubs?
We do not.
You
no,
do not,
no.
but you're aware of them.
Oh, yeah, and I know there's also a Chinese school. My friend at work sends his daughter where they actually learn Chinese.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's a good idea, because then she can talk behind your back. I want to know everything they're saying. Before all of this, so before you read that article, what did you think of adoption?
To be honest, I had never thought much about it. I mean, it's not something that happened in my family. It's not something that happened in my wife's family. So it wasn't, I mean, I joke now when I say I have an Italian wife and a Korean son and a Chinese daughter, kind of just like I always planned it. So, no, it's not. I never planned it that way. No.
And so how has your life changed? I mean, in your opinion of adoption?
I think adoption's fantastic. I mean, there's so many people out there, so many kids out there that need help. And I tell all 4 of my kids that I hope that they're going to adopt someday. And then our family will continue to grow in ways that certainly my ancestors never would have imagined.
Oh, I know, especially when you say, like, you've got Italian, Chinese, Korean.
I used to joke with my father, I say, I bet you never expected to have a Korean grandson. He'd say no.
And so what would you tell somebody who like you, saw, seeing you and your experience, similar to how you saw the newspaper article, what would you tell them to do? What's the first step?
Well, the first step, I think, would be to talk to an agency and see what the process is like. Like I said, I understand it has become more difficult since I did it. But in my experience, the hardest part of this whole process really is making the decision to do it. That's really the hardest part. Obviously, there's expense involved. It's a significant expense with overseas adoption. So domestic adoption is another option, which I understand is a lot less expensive. So there's a lot of options to consider.
Do you think there's any other stumbling blocks besides expenses?
Well, I know for me, already being a parent, if you're already a parent, you already know how to do this. If you're not a parent, still, I think a lot of it comes naturally. So, and I think the biggest stumbling blocks for international could be financial, or it could be some of the restrictions that come from overseas. A lot of there are health restrictions now, certain medications that they don't like people taking, things like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's gotten, for China in particular, they've gotten strict about that.
That is strange. That is really strange. So, you mentioned the domestic adoption, for people who might not be able to afford international adoptions. To me, the domestic adoptions isn't, like you said, isn't the financial, it's really finding the babies, because it just doesn't seem that there's as many babies to adopt anymore as there used to be, because the ready availability of abortion. Right. Do you see any way to change, I guess, society's opinion, or change the focus so that more women choose to place their babies for adoption rather than? kill them.
Well, obviously, just seeing adoptive families is a powerful pro-life witness in itself. I mean, I certainly can't pretend to know what a young woman thinks about, but I think just seeing my family and knowing that there are people out there that want to take in these children can only help.
That's a really good point, you know, so that almost everybody knows somebody who is adopted, but if it's, you know, a domestic adoption and you know, the adoptive child looks similar, you know, European, like the adoptive parents, you might not even know that they're adopted. And that's why I always tell everybody I was adopted, you know, kind of like as like you say, kind of an example. But the more people that see, especially the international adoptees, and the families and how they react, that's a really good point, that more and more women will see how great adoptive families and how loving they are, and maybe they'll, you know, tend more often to choose to give their child that beautiful gift of a family.
Yeah. And one of the benefits of, you know, modern culture is that, you know, everybody's pushing inclusiveness, and I can honestly say that even though we have a multiracial family, in 9 years we've never had a bad incident. I mean, never even a dirty look. In fact, just the opposite. I think because it's so obvious that we're an adoptive family, we get a lot of nice reactions that people really think it's pretty cool.
Oh, it is. It is, and you see it more and more. You know, and like you say, it's so obvious because, you know, the children, although they kind of starting to look like you guys, they do fit right in. So the obstacles for adoption, like you say, the expense, and obviously in the United States, it's just finding the children to adopt. And the other side is we really are trying to, you know, put forth a better PR for adoption, so like you said, women will choose that. Can you think of any other?
Well, if there was any way, I don't know why the process is so difficult. For example, I don't know why international adoption has to cost so much. I don't know why domestic adoption, I mean, there's so much paperwork and red tape, but I guess probably there's no way around that. I mean, when government regulation's involved, that's the way it has to be.
That's it.
I think that's one reason why parents don't do it, is just because it seems so daunting.
It does, but it didn't sound. I mean, like you said, it's a little bit more daunting now than it was when you went through the experience. But you're right. As soon as the government gets involved in it, it does become more and more, you know, crazy. And like you said, the documentation for the overseas adoption was way more than, like, you know, than when you went to the hospital to have your children.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and so it does seem that they're putting way too many restrictions. I understand they want you to protect the children so that they know that the children are being placed into a good home. But we know so many people, you know, who are waiting, and they are good homes.
Yeah.
And they're, you know, they're there. So we really shouldn't. But I think it's because there's so few children.
And I guess the other thing that I just thought of too is health insurance can be a hindrance. I mean, I know my health insurance company wanted to be quite sure that the children that I was bringing home were healthy. And I guess I understand where they're coming from, because I mean, people may want to bring home, you know, kids that need a lot of medical attention and just kind of ask the health insurer to take care of that. But they wanted to be sure that the kids were healthy.
Oh, so you actually had to bring in your own health insurance into the process?
Yeah, I mean, once I bring them home, they're mine, and they have to be under my insurance. But, you know, where something's a pre-existing condition and where something's not, with adoption, it's a little hard to say. I mean, they have what they have.
Yeah, yeah. So now, does your health insurance have to have some kind of documentation from Korea or China?
Yes,
before?
we got very good medical records from Korea, even some medical tests that they don't do here. I mean, we got a brain scan, for goodness sake, routinely brain scan. From China, there's very little, but we were blessed both times to get very healthy children.
Oh, so then, wow, I didn't realize that. I really didn't realize that. I mean, it makes sense because, you know, it wouldn't be cost effective for the insurance company.
I mean, there are people that do this. I mean,
Yeah.
I know there are people that adopt handicapped children, children with special needs. I don't know how it works, but, you know, for me, they wanted to be sure that that wasn't going to be the case.
Wow, I never even really thought about that. So what do you think the, it's so funny how the whole thing transpired, but What do you think was the biggest change to your life? What were you most surprised about?
Well, it had been a while since my wife and I had had little ones, and I guess the nice thing to see is I think that we're better parents now than we were the first time. I mean, we're older, we've learned a lot. You know, we had a boy and then a 3-year gap and then a girl, and now we have the same thing again, a boy, a 3-year gap, and a girl. So it's interesting to see how much more confident we are, and I think we're doing a better job.
So the older two are just practice.
Yeah, and the older two help out a lot too.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a big help to have older kids to help out with the raising of the kids, and also to tell you, don't do that. You did that with us. We didn't like that. How do you think your wife would feel the same way, or did she have different experience?
No, she had the same experience. I'm sure she took, you know, she attached to the kids right away. I know when I brought my daughter home from China, you know, I traveled to China with my son. She didn't travel.
I bet that drove her crazy.
So yeah, you know, of course I called her every day, and you know, but when I brought her home, it was the middle of the night. Our flight was delayed, and I was so tired. I just kind of handed her to her and went to bed. But by the time I woke up in the morning, they had already bonded.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh, that's probably a really special time, you
Yeah.
know, that she just had her to herself and no interference from Daddy or anything. That is awesome. And the kids, you said the older kids, they took right to the kids.
Oh yeah,
too.
the older kids are great. Joseph loves to do everything with his big brother, and Rose is great with both the kids too.
Yeah, so they really look up to them.
Yeah.
That's something. I mean, what a huge gift, you know, to think. Now, they were both in orphanages to begin with, or foster parents?
Joseph was with foster parents. In Lily's case, I don't know too much about where she was before I got her. I know that she was very healthy and happy, so she was well cared for wherever she was. And in China, that's not always the case.
Exactly, exactly. I know of much different cases. But that, you know, that's such a beautiful gift, you know, to give to your older kids, to younger siblings, and then obviously to your younger kids, the beautiful family. And I just don't, I just hope more people, you know, will see this, you know, and want to do the same thing, emulate you.
It's enriched our lives tremendously, and I'd recommend it to anybody. Yeah.
And I would also, you know, encourage women, you know, girls, especially girls, young girls who are 16, 17, and find themselves in a crisis pregnancy. You know, just have the courage, you know, to say, the best thing for my child is for a loving family to raise them and allow me to, you know, fulfill my dreams and go to school and get a career and everything. And that it's not bad. It's not something negative to give a child up for adoption.
Right, and just the fact that people are waiting so long on the waiting list shows that there's people there that want these children.
Yeah, and then that they'll give them a beautiful, loving home. Thank you so much for sharing your family with us. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you've learned something. We hope you talk to your family and friends about the things that you learned here. And we hope when you look in the mirror the next time, you realize yours too is the face of pro-life. Please join us again next time.